It is an honor to be talking this morning about the legacy of C.S. Wu toward equity and inclusion. Some slides will catch up with my words soon, I hope. This honor really does not belong to me. It should be Dr. Mia Ong's because she is a renowned expert on inclusion of women of color in STEM. But today, Mia must balance work and family by celebrating the 10th anniversary of her son, Luke. And with my own son's childhood far behind them, I will do my best to give this talk to you. Dr. Ong is seen here on the AIP Team Up Task Force. With its goal, Dr. Gates is also on the task force. With its goal to double the number of African-American physics majors, Team Up represents great progress toward equity. Dr. Wu also represented progress, as in this photo of prize winners, not honorary degrees, not national prizes. This is an accolade from Mademoiselle magazine for women. And it's pretty cool that along with a white actress and nurse, an African-American attorney, and a Chinese physicist, Madam Wu, were showcased to average, ordinary women across the United States. Dr. Wu's brilliant works, history of historical firsts and dedication to science, family, and China, did these make her a timeless role model? Yes. Did she make a tireless effort to support the women around her? Yes. Was she a published, outspoken scholar of equity? No. However, her lived experiences viewed through the lens of race and gender studies enable us to do all of these things today. A PhD thesis or a course on race, gender, and science could feature Madam Wu as a centerpiece. In her later career, she does address an issue that feminist scholars have long pondered. Why is physics so linked to masculinity when the subjects of study like atomic nuclei are gender-free? Dr. Ji Zhang showed us this quote from his talk. Sorry, I think we're still back one slide. Can we go back one slide? There we go. Thank you so much. Therefore, it's rather ironic that there is this logo depicting the opposite particles, a positron and an electron, as having opposite sets. This picture was selected by the meeting organizer based on the evening stories he told his tiny daughter who drew this. And my advice to these kids is these particles should back away from each other because this relationship is totally doomed. I give it about 100 nanoseconds. It has long been recognized that physics is a particularly chilly realm for women, and this is based on cultural expectations of the difference between women and men. Physics is constructed as a barren, emotionless realm populated by innately brilliant, nerdy men. And C.S. Wu was a stereotypical physicist in some ways. Her nonstop work ethic, leaving the lab at 4 in the morning, science always came first with her huge intellectual achievement, and this propelled her stellar career. However, today, we must call out false beliefs and unnecessary behaviors which prevent more women from thriving in physics. Things like assuming that ability is inborn, assuming that minorities have less ability, that physicists must keep the gate and decide who comes in and who stays out, and that diversity work is just not our job. These are false. These are false. So my contention is that one could, for example, teach a course, next slide, please, on gender and physics, which showcases Wu's life. The first thing you do is you name the women scientists who are invisible, who so many people, they just cannot name a woman scientist. So we must name Madam Wu, and we must also contextualize her great work. Why did she start her career at a small women's college, Smith, instead of Princeton Institute for Advanced Study? Why it had no research facilities, and what did it mean for her to be a Chinese person in 1944 America who was actually recruited for the Manhattan Project? The next item on the syllabus would be to talk about the ebb and flow of women's participation. At the risk of oversimplifying, if we look at Europe, the scientific revolution was a key moment when women were demoted from being men's scientific equals. A dualistic Cartesian view of the world supplanted a more magical and holistic model. And it is, of course, important and precious to include non-European history and to celebrate China's history. China's history was apparently different in detail, but it revealed a similar pattern of ebb and flow of women's participation. In Wu's young years, during the period of the Republic of China, division of labor by gender existed for most folks, and the ancient dictum, men plow, women weave, was in sway. In the Mao era, it began to be women pulled up half the sky. However, though women could labor as men, they were still expected to do domestic work and raise their families. Next slide, please. Well-known biological and psychological factors that we talk about in such a course were evident in Wu's life, such as obstacles like anti-Asian sentiment in the US, gender schemas, seeing herself as a child, as a scientist from her girlhood on, having role models and allies, but being both invisible, there's so few people like her, and hyper visible. Oh, it's easy to spot her. She's so singular. She's so beautiful. She managed these factors. And there were some factors that plague women that were not operant in her life. The exception proves the rule. Madame Wu's unshakable self-image clearly inoculated her from stereotype threat and from imposter syndrome, which is an internal experience of intellectual phoniness. Her rich history provides a potent focus for discussion of these important issues. Next slide, please. Examples in terms of teaching and learning of influences that support minoritized students in STEM are that STEM resonates with their core identity and that others express confidence that they're going to succeed. And so fortunate is the minoritized STEM woman who goes to a women's college, or Black STEM student who goes to a historically Black institution, and that they have enthusiastic support from their parents and things. C.S. Wu had the good fortune to experience both of these. She went to Mingday School for Girls, founded by her father. She went to Suzhou Girls High School and Nanjing University with a women's dormitory, excellent science faculty. And she was encouraged by her father, mother, uncle, teachers, and peers. Next slide. A last issue I want to highlight, and it's key, is whether one can both have a family and a physics career. C.S. Wu had both good fortune and great judgment. Her husband, Lu Yuan, was a physicist, a dedicated parent, domestic partner. She hired a nanny. She allowed her intelligent young son when he was old enough to be independent, and she was content with her chosen balance point. It might be tempting to critique Madame Wu for a balance point so skewed toward work, but this would be inappropriate. Concept of mothers being solely responsible for childcare, rampant in the US during that era, should be critiqued. No one questioned wealthy aristocratic women through history who delegated the care of their children to servants. Also, there was little concept of balance for working women when women married or became pregnant, they were expected to quit work. Given this, CSU had to give 100% or she could give nothing at all. But her warmth and advocacy toward her students, including the advice to not have children in grad school, was sadly consistent with these data shown on people abandoning plans to have a research career. For the women in dark brown, but not the men in gold color, you can see these bars. The closer that one gets to child rearing, the more likely one is to abandon the goal to be a researcher. Next slide, please. One must talk about Asian American women in STEM and intersectionality. There are unique problems faced by Asian American women in STEM today. They contend with being stereotyped, either passive and submissive, so-called lotus flowers, or strong and sinister and sexual, the dragon lady. We read that Wu's students called her dragon lady, and a biographer claims it was used affectionately, referring to her being a tough taskmaster. However, if we interrogate the dragon lady stereotype, her powers are used for villainy. They are never used for good. And so I question whether it's really affectionate. And also, there was a double standard. Her students acknowledged that Wu was the kindest and most caring advisor at Columbia Physics. And so this kind of double standard is very well known. Stereotypes can be double-edged. For example, oh, Asians are smart, but they are not leaders. Nonsense. Or stereotypes can be contradictory. While Asians are constructed as smart and tech-minded, this conflicts with the stereotype that women are neither of these things. Wu and Jing give statistics on tenure, employment, college presidency for white, Asian, Black, and Hispanic women and men. And you will note with the dark red curve that Asian women come last. This is for being a full professor. They come last in all measures. And the self-reports below show that these women need to repeatedly prove their competence. they are pressured to be hyper feminine. This is a huge burden placed on Asian American women. One interviewee said, "You can't just be a normal person." Next slide, please. So fragmentation involves racial or gender passing, and it's been explored as a strategy for women of color by Ong in order to match. So a fragmented person tries to match the image of a generic physicist when they're with physicists. They try to be a typical woman when they're hanging with typical women. It depends on the environment. Fragmentation can be exhausting, and it ends up forcing people out of physics. On the other hand, the strategy of multiplicity involves knitting together your different identities. It's more empowering. It does require strong ability apparent to others and a strong foundation. And it's clearly something that was the case for Madame Wu. Her attendance at girls' schools, Nanjing University, permitted her to be a Chinese woman studying science and spared her the early challenges to her self-presentation. She formed an integrated character, and Wu was favorably regarded for all her features: her scientific brilliance, her warmth to her carefully chosen group, her physical beauty, which in another context, like the United States in the 30s, would each trigger a different stereotype, not fully consistent with professional respect for a woman. Still, it's no wonder that we learn Madame Wu was cautious and even remote in dealing with the larger world, and that she stepped back from fame. This must have protected. I want to just mention the amazing work of Ong and her team. Ong has studied intersectionality in STEM for over 25 years. Her team's collected over 600 narratives from higher education students in a variety of STEM fields who identify as being of color. She's also led 3 literature synthesis projects for which the team reviewed tens of thousands of pieces of research literature. Ong and her colleague, next slide, please, determined that women of color often have a set of experiences identified as social pain. This is defined as social interactions that divert cognitive resources away from the study and practice of science to managing their social environment. Dealing with racism or sexism saps the energy and the mental clarity of the person who is the target. And experiences which appear in their research include feeling isolated or ignored, having others hold low expectations of one's abilities, dealing with small or large types of harassment and gaslighting. Happily, Ong found that women of color are not passive. They seek to counteract social pain to persist. They enact agency. And here on the next slide is a list of the strategies they employ. And we can see that so many of these strategies were employed by Madame Wu. For example, 5, finding environments that enable research success. Her choosing Columbia U over Princeton in the early 40s, her selecting NIST for her renowned ultra-low temperature experiment on conservation of parity. If you'll flip the slide, I'll just mention 2 strategies. One, the love of science, that there are many young women of color in physics today who feel the same kind of passion for scientific discovery as Wu. This quote is a typical experience of passion. Wow, a lot of time looking at equations. I feel totally stressed out about it sometimes, but it is still beautiful. It is still a real gift, says a Latinx woman in 2018. On the next slide, I want to highlight the notion of counter spaces, which are safe spaces that let marginalized people have their experiences validated, where they can vent their frustrations, share their coping strategies, and develop an identity that is positive based on their race and gender. Ong's work applies the idea of counter spaces to STEM and identifies these in multiple areas. They don't just have to be physical spaces. Now, C.S. Wu benefited from counter spaces in her career. As a grad student at Berkeley, the International House was a counter space where she resided. And on the next slide, we have a contemporary description of a departmental counter space enjoyed by a Black woman in physics. Her department set a different cultural standard, different from what was outside, made her environment fun, made it accepting. And we also see a quote from Noemi Benzer-Kohler, who was a grad student of C.S. Wu, that in her lab, students were endowed with an advisor-student relationship of grace, love, affection. They were showered with friendship and encouragement, nurtured and supported. Interestingly, Ong does not find this pattern typically. Typically nowadays, women of color report that their lab is a place of social pain requiring an alternative counterspace. Only occasionally an advisor shines like Madame Wu as being friendly, encouraging, nurturing. Next slide, please, is my final substantive slide. Thank you for listening to such a long tutorial talk. To conclude, Madame Wu set a shining example as a 20th century Chinese woman physicist. Her example not only endures, but as we've argued, has a powerful place in modern theorizing on women of color in STEM. This quote, one of Ong's favorites, is from a woman PhD physicist who, like Wu, was an active role model and mentor for non-traditional students. Zhenxing Wu has created a norm which lives on today as we seek to create a diverse, inclusive environment in physics. And my last slide is thank you. So if you could just flip to me saying thank you to our funders. Thank you to Dasuan Fan, Cheng Ying, the entire organizing committee. Thank you to the Chinese Physical Society very much, and to the American Physical Society, the Nanjing Alumni Association of the United States. Can we have applause? And finally, to a beloved mentor of mine long ago, David Park of Williams College, who is the one who first taught me about Madame Wu. And thank you for your kind attention.
Next, let's welcome Susan Lee, Maryland State Senator.
Hello, everyone. I'm Maryland State Senator Susan Lee. I represent District 16, but I'm also the Senate Majority Whip in the Maryland State Senate. And on behalf of our whole legislature, I feel very proud and honored and privileged to be here. And we send you greetings and congratulations on this wonderful event. I have to say that I'm very honored to be able to be here to honor Madam C.S. Wu. And thank you for that wonderful presentation. That wrapped up everything. I think I have to say the history of America is incomplete without the history of including Chinese and Asian Americans in that history, because our community built America. Generations of Chinese and Asian Americans built America through their many, many contributions, including science. And very often our contributions have been marginalized and also not recorded in history. And that includes also the history of immigrants, people of color, women, and people of all different faiths. So having this stamp and celebrating the 110th anniversary of birth is truly significant, because as a country, we're a country that is a work in progress. But the fact that now we have a stamp, that's great. And we're also honoring other outstanding persons of color and also immigrants and people of all different backgrounds, which is what our country is all about. I have to say that Madame Wu was the embodiment of many of our own life experiences and also our hopes and dreams, because she really was the epitome of just being a typical woman multitasker that could do 5 things at one time and be one of the world's top nuclear physicists, but also have a family and also be a great human being and set herself as an example, an exemplar for generations to come. And you all out there, our Chinese American community, but also our Chinese partners from China, are now setting the example and making really great developments in science. We've been really hurt. I have to say this because I just want to be truthful. The last presidential administration set us back in science years because we were singled out, targeted. We were targets of violence and discrimination just because of our ethnic origin. And I'd like to thank everyone here who helped me and Congressman Jamie Raskin, Congressman Riffelsberger, and Congressman David Trone for getting together the hearing on the discrimination against Chinese scientists that we did. Because you know what, your efforts, because you weren't passive. You came together and helped us have that hearing to highlight. Secretary Stephen Chu was also part of that effort to highlight the injustices. You know, we want to all go after bad actors when there's espionage, but you can't cast a wide net on everybody who is of Chinese descent, because that really hurts science. A lot of our developments in science have occurred because of all the international cooperation that has occurred. And you can't do it without that cooperation because people share information. But we still want to get the bad actors, but you can't cast that wide net because science will be taken back years. So I thank you, each and every one of you who helped us in the China initiative. That did not work. And they hardly found any instances of espionage. So now I hope that our new president, or no, he's not new anymore, can take us forward. And also, as Dutch Ripperturker said, don't get tempted to just villainize everyone because science hurts when you do this. So anyway, on behalf of my General Assembly, Maryland General Assembly, I thank you for honoring Madam Wu and for all the distinguished scientists who are here from who are American and Chinese, who are now coming together to create this wonderful collaboration partnership. I thank my friend, Dr. Ping Lu, for inviting me. Thank you. She's done a marvelous job. And also Connie, thank you. And all the leaders, Dr. Zhang, is he here? Dr. Chinming Zhang is the organizer, right? And Dr. Fen, thank you, because we can't do this without you. We stand on your shoulders. Thank you so much on behalf of the Maryland General Assembly for inviting us, and let's go forward, okay? Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Christina Poi, Maryland Governor's representative. She's the Administrative Director, Governor's Commission on Asian Pacific America Affairs, to be on the stage. And I also would like to invite Mr. Zhang Chengming, the president of Nanjing University alumni in US.
大家好，我叫王佩莲，我是马里兰州州长的代表。I like to introduce myself in Chinese because my great-grandfather came from Guangzhou, China in the late 1800s, and I'm the fourth generation Chinese American to live in the state of Maryland. It's my distinct pleasure as the first Chinese American woman to be appointed by any governor as a director of the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives and as the director of the Governor's Commissions on Asian Pacific American Affairs and South Asian American Affairs. So it's such an honor for me to be here to present this governor's citation on behalf of Governor Larry Hogan. I'd also like to point out we have another appointee here, and that's Judge Chung Pak. He's the chief judge of all the administrative judges in the state of Maryland. So that's I think he's got 600 people that he's the boss of. So again, I'd like to present this on behalf of Governor Larry Hogan from the state of Maryland in the memory of Madame Qian Shengwu. Be it known that on behalf of the citizens of the state, in recognition of a tribute to honor the lifetime achievements of the world's most outstanding Asian woman physicist, a woman who has been admired throughout history for her service and contributions as a leader in the field of physics. Her scientific achievements remain an inspiration to those seeking to advance in the latest scientific discoveries. And as our citizens join together to honor the occasion of her 110th birthday of the First Lady of Physics Research, we are pleased to confer this governor's citation. Is signed by Governor Larry Hogan, the Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford, and Secretary of State John Wilbon-Smith.谢谢您。
Thank you very much, Thank you very much from the governor of state of Maryland, the great state of Maryland.
Thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to actually myself and two other my colleagues to come from China representing CPS, as well as personally deliver a letter from Professor Wang Gang to commemorate Madam Wu at this very, very special occasion. On a personal note, I'm a very proud alumnus of Madam Wu. I graduated from Nanjing University 24 years ago. I got my bachelor, and my first 10 years of my research career, in fact, I worked with two experimental teams using the parity violation that Madam Wu discovered as a tool to study the structure of nuclei. So Madam Wu she's really my hero in many ways, not just her name, but really that she ushered my career. So with that, now the letter from Professor Wang Gang to Dr. Zhang Jie, the president of Chinese Physical Society, and Dr. Francis Hellman, the president of American Physical Society. Dear Dr. Zhang and Dr. Hellman, I'm delighted to learn that the Chinese Physical Society and American Physical Society are jointly celebrating the 110th anniversary of the birthday of Dr. Chen Wu. On behalf of the China Association for Science and Technology, CAST, I would like to extend my warm congratulations on the event and sincere greetings to the participating scientists from both China and the United States. Dr. Chen Wu was among the most outstanding physicists of the 20th century. Her extraordinary achievements in experimental physics had substantially contributed to the progress of the discipline. She was a woman of many firsts. The first female honorable doctor of Princeton University, the first Chinese American member of the National Academy of Science of the United States, and the first female president of the American Physical Society. She has always been a role model for generations of the Chinese and American young scientists, especially women scientists, inspiring them to strive for excellence in their pursuit for science. Dr. Wu had always been committed to promoting exchanges and cooperation between China and the United States in the field of scientific research and education. The efforts of Dr. Wu and other Chinese and American physicists had led to plenty of successful collaborations. For instance, the China-US cooperation in the field of high-energy physics marked the beginning of the collaboration between the science communities of the two countries. Another example was the China-US Physics Examination and Application, the so-called CUSPIA, a program that helped China train nearly 1,000 outstanding physicists. The China-US Roundtable of scientists have been advocating openness in exchanges. In addition, the Chinese and American science community have also been working together to jointly address common global challenges. To commemorate Dr. Wu, we should carry forward the spirit of scientists represented by her, the spirit of unremittingly exploring the endless frontiers of science. We need to work together to address common global challenges so as to make our due contributions to the sustainable development of human society and the protection of the earth, our beautiful home. As the home of the largest number of science and technology professionals in the world, CAST is committed to enhancing openness, trust, and cooperation with the international science community. We look forward to working together with our American colleagues to cement the friendship and promote exchanges and cooperation among scientists of the two countries, so as to jointly make more contributions to the advancement of the science and technology and the welfare of the people. Wish this event a great success. Sincerely, Professor Wang Gang, President CAS. Thank you very much.
Next, we thank you very much for this comment from from Minister Wang Gang.